Hey y'all, hey, I'm Dr. Nicole Price, and welcome back to the Overcome Her series. Today, we're going to talk about overcoming indifference. You know, when I consider what Martin Luther King shared in his book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? The chapter on the middle class Black folk, sometimes I think about myself. I grew up in poverty, like many Black people do. But once I had gotten educated and this system worked for me, and I was able to enjoy this American dream, I too started to look at people's circumstances through a lens of indifference, not spitefulness, not overwhelming amounts of disregard, but truly indifference. And it was in that indifferent state when I got my first job as an executive. I was working, doing many of the things that I absolutely love, publicly speaking from the stage. And I know that this is the story of many Black women. But oftentimes, when we get to those seats at the table, we find out that it is our skin that puts us in a broken chair. You're there, you're in the room, but you've been silenced. So, what do you do when this happens to you? I was working at the time for a woman named Cy Wakeman, and we had a client who was interested in a diversity and inclusion session that married, with their leadership sessions. Well, I was the only Black person on the team, and what I did not want to do was to be the one Black person, the token in Iowa, teaching almost or largely white organization about diversity. This was circa 2015, well before the world was sparked into consciousness about race and racism at the expense of the murder of George Floyd. Cy talked me into doing this session, and I did it. And the people were thrilled. In fact, I had said that there were only going to be 6 of them, and the people were thrilled. Her assistant at the time, beautiful woman named Sarah, submitted the program, which we called Reality Based Inclusion, to the Association of Talent Development. And they accepted the proposal. And everything went south from there. But here's why I am putting this in the Overcomer series called Indifference. When have you sat solidly in a place, not really concerned or not really concerning yourself with the systemic station in life of all Black people or all Black women? Have you ever been there? I'm ashamed to say that I was. And it wasn't that I didn't care. I was just woefully indifferent. Woefully indifferent. I went about my life concerning myself with my kid, concerning myself with my family, concerning myself with my job, and what was going on with everybody else. It was in my circle of concern, not nearly in my circle of control in any way, shape, or form. I would do some volunteer assignments here or there, some charity assignments here or there, but otherwise, didn't do much. Fast forward, now my relationship with Sai is strained. And I don't know how many of you have ever had cross-racial friendships, or at least thought you had cross-racial friendships. And then when race comes up, it becomes a problem. But one day we were in Maine and we were being interviewed by a radio station, and I do not know the radio station's name. But the interviewer asked a question because my topic was about diversity and inclusion, and they wanted to know what our take was. Sai gets to the mic and she says, I believe that looking at learned helplessness, or looking at race and racism and talking about it from a discriminatory standpoint, is like learned helplessness. If you tie elephants up when they're infants to a tree, when they're just little calves, those elephants will try really hard to pull away. She went on to tell the story about how at just about 6 weeks, an elephant or a tiny calf, just when they get the strength to actually break the chain, they stop trying. And she said they have the ability, but they have learned to be helpless. This is a psychological phenomenon, and I believe that many basically underrepresented minorities struggle with the same thing. And it was at that time that the interviewer puts the mic in my face and says, Nicole, what do you think? And I said, here's the challenge. We should not be putting elephants in chains. You see, yes, there are people who, even though we have systems of oppression at our fingertips all around us, like it's in the air we breathe, that sometimes it's hard for us to acknowledge it. And yes, there are those of us who the system works for us and we can get out of it. I was one of them. But the exceptions actually underscore the rule. They let us know that there is a rule, that this caste system, using the language of Isabel Wilkerson, still exists. So the relationship between Cy and I became very, very strained. And I ultimately ended up being fired. But see, sis, just like all the Black women I know, on my 3-hour ride home, what I did was strategize on what my business was going to be. I'll tell you in the next session or in the next Overcome Her episode exactly how I was able to build a business. But for now, what you need to know is before I could get that business up and off the ground, she sued me on 27 counts. 27 counts for my own work. You want to know the outcome? I'll tell you in the next episode. But for now, you know what I want you to know. Always, always, always want you to know. And that is that I have 3 points. Always 3 points. Number 1, internalized racial oblivion is a thing. There are so many people who are not hateful. They just don't care about the issues of Black people at large. And baby, if that's you, eventually that's going to be you. This thing called racism is going to come knocking at your door. If you could have asked Michael Jackson, he'll tell you. If you could have asked the likes of Prince, he'll tell you. If you could ask Vernon Jordan, he'll tell you. If you could ask Herman Cain, he'll tell you. You cannot educate your way out of it. You cannot get enough money. Ask Bill Cosby to get out of this. You cannot. The second thing is we have got to use the discerning spirit God gave us. Some people choose white over right all the time. People will say to me, you know, Nicole, sometimes white people will vote against their own interests. There's a beautiful book I love by Heather McGhee. It is called The Sum of Us, What Racism Cost Everyone. And she talks about how white people vote against their own interests. And I will tell you this, they're not voting against their own interest. Their interest is whiteness. It is a rare occasion when white people will choose right over white. Now, I'm not telling you that that does not exist, because it does. I have white friends. But what I want you to know is that you need to trust what you see and what you observe and what is in front of you and the examples that people are leaving instead of what they present to you. And then my third and final point is God intends for you to stand up for what's right, even if it costs you your job. I'll tell you what the outcome was of my lawsuit. I'll tell you what the outcome was of how I built my business when you check me out in the next episode, Overcoming Deception. But for now, if you want to know more about any of this, all of this, I want you to think about purchasing the book, The Holy Educated MFer. whenever you can visit Amazon. If you are not in the spirit of giving all of your money to the Jeff Bezos, you can go to my website, drnicoleprice.com. And if you purchase from me, you'll get an autographed copy in addition to a free little gift. And you can use the code SUPERFAN to get 25% off of those items. It has been an absolute pleasure to be here with you, my dears, and know this. You have it within you to overcome the unthinkable.